John lived an ordinary life in a small town on Earth. He was a schoolteacher at the local high school, teaching history to teenagers. Morning classes, afternoon lessons, and quiet evenings at home. He had no grand ambitions, no great dreams of adventure. People in town knew him as a quiet man, friendly, but not particularly remarkable. He had few close friends, mostly just the neighbors and a few colleagues. To them, John was simply one of many, just another person living an unassuming life. Princess Lyra, on the other hand, was far from ordinary. She was from the Xanthion Empire, a race of aliens with technology so advanced that their starships could travel across galaxies. The Xanthans were a powerful species, having conquered many worlds. Lyra herself was highly respected, known for her intelligence and royal bloodline. She had seen and experienced many things that most beings could never imagine. Empire had sent her to Earth as part of an intergalactic peace mission. Lyra was meant to observe the humans, study their culture, and report back. In her eyes, Earth was just another insignificant planet, full of weak, primitive beings. When Lyra first arrived on Earth, she was unimpressed. She landed in the small town where John lived, expecting to see nothing but backwardness and chaos. The people here were unrefined, using outdated technology, living simple lives with no understanding of the advanced systems that governed the galaxy. Lyra spent her days observing Earth's humans, but she found little of interest. They went about their daily routines, unaware of the vastness of the universe around them. Most of the time, she watched from a distance, studying their habits with a clinical detachment. John's life, from Lyra's perspective, was no different from the others. He was an average man, blending into the background of a planet that seemed insignificant to her. He didn't stand out in any way. His life was peaceful, quiet, and unchanging. He spent his days teaching and his nights reading books or taking long walks around the town. He never sought attention and never tried to impress anyone, but that was exactly why Lyra didn't think much of him. She assumed he was like all the others, plain, unremarkable, and weak. John had no idea that the alien princess was observing him. He had no reason to suspect that someone so far beyond human understanding had set her sights on him. He was just going through the motions of his day, doing his job, and living his life, unaware that he was about to become part of something far greater than he could ever imagine, but that would soon change. One afternoon, as John was walking home from school, he noticed something strange in the sky. A small object, not a plane or a bird, moved swiftly through the air, making no sound. It was bright and metallic, and it moved in a way that no earthly craft could. John stopped for a moment, his curiosity piqued. He had seen many strange things in his life, but nothing like this. Before he could think any further, the object disappeared behind the clouds. Meanwhile, Lyra's mission had taken an unexpected turn. As she spent more time on Earth, she began to notice something she hadn't expected, a certain resilience in the humans. Though they were technologically inferior, they had a drive, a will to survive and adapt that was unlike anything Lyra had encountered in other species. This was not just a planet full of weaklings. There was something more to these people, something she hadn't given them credit for. And then it happened. The skies above Earth suddenly grew dark. Strange ships appeared on the horizon, massive, menacing, and unlike anything Lyra had seen before. A fleet of alien invaders had arrived, their intentions clear. Earth was about to be taken. The invaders began their attack, destroying communication systems, disabling satellites, and causing chaos across the globe. People screamed in panic as the first bombs fell. The Xanthion Empire had underestimated the power of the invaders, and their defenses were not enough to stop them. In the midst of this destruction, Lyra's first instinct was to call for help. She attempted to contact her fleet, but the interference from the invaders' technology was too strong. There was nothing she could do. Her advanced technology was useless against these new enemies. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt vulnerable. The attack on Earth was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It came without warning, alien ships suddenly filling the sky, dropping bombs and unleashing destructive energy beams. Cities crumbled as the invaders began their assault, leaving nothing. but panic and chaos in their wake. The skies grew dark with the smoke of burning buildings, and people ran in all directions, unsure of where to go or what to do. Princess Lyra, standing in the midst of the destruction, was horrified. Her advanced Xanthion technology, meant to defend the Earth and keep the peace, seemed powerless against these attackers. The alien ships that had arrived on Earth were unlike anything she had seen in the galaxy. They were fast, heavily armed, and capable of disabling even the most advanced systems. The communication lines were jammed, the military forces were scattered, and the chaos only deepened as the days passed. Lyra, for the first time in her life, felt completely out of control. She tried to organize a defense, commanding the Xanthion ships that had been deployed to Earth, but it was clear that the invaders were far more advanced than anything her people had prepared for. The Xanthion weapons, despite their power, couldn't break through the enemy shields, and their ships were destroyed one by one. Lyra watched as her comrades fell in battle, knowing she couldn't save them. The situation was growing desperate. Lyra's thoughts raced, but she was shaken. She had believed that her people, with all their technology and might, would have no trouble dealing with a small planet like Earth. But now, she was seeing something different. The invaders weren't interested in negotiations or peaceful resolution. They were here to conquer, and nothing would stand in their way. Lyra felt a wave of helplessness wash over her, and she knew there was nothing she could do to stop them. Then, she was contemplating the dire situation. She heard something that made her stop. It was a voice, not a voice of command or authority, but a calm, steady voice that cut through the panic and chaos. It came from John. John had been watching the destruction unfold in his quiet town. The schools were evacuated, and the streets were filled with people running for cover. For most of the town's residents, this was their first encounter with the reality of an alien invasion. But for John, it was different. He had seen enough destruction in his time enough that he knew fear wasn't going to help anyone. He had grown up hearing stories about soldiers and brave men who fought in wars, and he had spent years quietly training himself in the art of survival, knowing that one day something like this might happen. As the explosions rained down and the world seemed to fall apart, John didn't panic. He didn't run for shelter like everyone else. Instead, he began organizing the people around him. He led them to safety in the underground shelters that he had helped build in the town over the years. These shelters were meant for natural disasters, but now they became a sanctuary against the alien onslaught. John worked quickly, speaking to the people in a calm voice. "Stay together," he said. "Follow me, and we'll get through this." His instructions were simple, but they had a sense of purpose that made people listen. They trusted him. Lyra, still trying to make sense of the situation, was watching from a distance. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. John, this quiet, average man she had dismissed as insignificant, was showing leadership in the middle of this crisis. While she struggled to organize the defenses of Earth with all her advanced technology, John was leading a group of terrified civilians to safety with nothing but his wit and his determination. It was almost as if he understood the situation better than she did. While Lyra was focused on fighting the invaders and restoring control to Earth, John was focused on saving lives. He wasn't interested in military strategy or advanced technology. He was focused on the one thing that truly mattered, the people around him, as the battle raged on outside. Lyra began to realize that there was something about John that set him apart from everyone else. He wasn't afraid to face danger head-on. He didn't wait for orders or instructions. He simply acted, and it was working. People were following him, listening to him, and they were staying alive because of him. She decided to approach him, although she still wasn't sure what to expect. As she walked toward John, she couldn't help but notice how different he was from the other humans she had encountered. His calm demeanor, his ability to think clearly in the midst of chaos. These were qualities that were rare even among the most advanced civilizations. When John saw Lyra approaching, he didn't flinch. He didn't look at her with awe or fear as many others did when they encountered someone from the Xanthion Empire. Instead, he gave her a simple nod, acknowledging her presence without hesitation. "You're not running?" she asked, her voice laced with surprise. "I don't have time for that," John replied. But people need help. We need to fight, not run. For the first time, Lyra felt something shift inside her. She had always believed that strength came from technology, from power, and from control. But here was this human, with no advanced weapons or ships, showing the kind of strength that could never be measured in numbers. John was leading the way, not with weapons, but with his courage, and Lyra found herself unable to look away. Maybe we're not so different after all, she muttered to herself, watching as John rallied the people around him. She knew one thing for sure: Earth's future was no longer in the hands of the Xanthian Empire. It was in the hands of ordinary humans like John. The days passed and the battle for Earth continued to rage. The invaders showed no sign of stopping. Their ships hovered above the cities, attacking from the skies, while ground forces stormed the planet, causing chaos wherever they went. Lyra, still trying to organize a defense, found herself increasingly frustrated. Despite all her advanced technology and her knowledge of the universe, nothing seemed to be working. The enemy was relentless, and their weapons were unlike anything the Xanthans had ever encountered. In the midst of this disaster, John continued to lead the civilians in his town. He wasn't a military leader or a scientist, but he had something that Lyra had never considered: a deep understanding of what it meant to survive. His knowledge came not from advanced alien technology or years of training, but from the simple lessons of life. He understood people, how to keep them calm when everything seemed hopeless, how to make them work together, even when fear threatened to tear them apart. Lyra watched John from a distance. The more she saw, the more she was impressed. He wasn't just a teacher, as she had once thought. He was a leader. He had the ability to inspire others, to give them hope when it seemed like all was lost. People followed him not because of his knowledge of tactics or strategy, but because they believed in him. They trusted him. It was a kind of power that Lyra had never fully understood. One evening, as they sat in one of the underground shelters, Lyra approached John. The two of them hadn't spoken much since their first meeting. But Lyra had begun to realize how wrong she had been about him. John wasn't the simple, unremarkable man she had initially believed him to be. He was something much more. "You've been doing a good job," Lyra said quietly, standing near him as he surveyed the shelter. "I've been watching you." John didn't look up. He simply nodded. "I'm just trying to keep everyone safe. That's all that matters right now." Lyra didn't know how to respond to that. She had spent her whole life among beings who relied on power, on technology, on their superiority to other species. But John was different. He didn't seek power. He didn't care about being better than anyone else. All he cared about was doing what he could to help others. "You know," Lyra said, her voice softer now, "I didn't think much of humans when I first came here. I thought you were weak, insignificant." John's gaze finally met hers, and for a moment they just stared at each other. There was no anger in his eyes, no judgment, just understanding. "I guess we all have our own opinions when we don't know anything about each other," he replied. "I wasn't much different. I thought of your people as just another alien race too. But you're not so different from us after all." Lyra was silent for a moment. She had always seen herself as different, as someone above the humans. But now, as she stood here with John, she wasn't so sure. There was something about him, something in the way he led the others, the way he cared for them that made her question everything she had believed. Maybe humans weren't as weak as she had thought. Maybe there was more to them than she could see at first glance. As they talked, the distant sound of explosions shook the ground, reminding them of the war that still raged outside. Lyra could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had come to Earth with a mission, a belief that her people's superiority would be enough to protect the planet. But now, she was beginning to realize that the Xanthian Empire wasn't as invincible as she had once thought. The invaders were powerful, yes, but they weren't unbeatable. And if she was going to help Earth, she was going to need more than just advanced technology. She turned to John again. "I need your help," she said, her voice firm. "We need to work together to fight back." John raised an eyebrow. "And how do you suggest we do that? Your ships and weapons haven't been much help so far, I know," Lyra admitted. But there's more to fighting than just weapons. It's about the people. It's about rallying them, making them believe that they can win. You've done that here, John. You've kept these people alive because they trust you. We need to make the rest of the world understand that they can fight back too. The invaders can be defeated, but only if everyone believes they can.
John
thought for a moment. He had always believed that human strength came from within, from the will to survive and protect those they loved. It wasn't about fancy weapons or alien technology. It was about the heart, the courage to face impossible odds. And maybe, just maybe, that was something Lyra could learn from him. "All right," he said finally, his voice calm but determined. "I'll help you, but it won't be easy. We'll have to trust each other." Lyra nodded. For the first time since her arrival on Earth, she felt a sense of hope. Maybe this wasn't the battle she had expected. Maybe it wasn't about advanced technology or superior firepower. Maybe it was about something much more simple and far more powerful. Together, they began to plan their next move. And as they worked side by side, Lyra knew one thing for certain. The battle for Earth had just begun. And it was a battle they would win, not with superior weapons, but with the strength of human courage. The day of the final battle arrived, and the air was thick with tension. Lyra, John, and the small group of survivors had spent the past few days preparing for this moment. They had worked together to create a plan, one that combined the strength of the humans' courage and the advanced technology of the Xanthans. But as the hours ticked by, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a fight. They might not survive. The invaders had made their presence known, their ships filling the sky like dark clouds. The ground forces were ready, marching toward the last remaining human strongholds, determined to finish what they had started. Odds were stacked against them, but Lyra knew that they couldn't back down. This was their only chance to push back, to show the invaders that humanity wasn't as weak as they thought. John stood at the front of the small group, looking out over the battlefield. He wasn't a soldier, and he wasn't trained in warfare. But he had something the invaders didn't understanding of people, of what it meant to fight for something bigger than yourself. The humans weren't fighting for power or domination. They were fighting for their homes, their families, their future. And that was a power the invaders could never understand. Lyra stood beside him, watching the preparations with a mixture of respect and uncertainty. She had seen her people face countless battles, but this was different. This wasn't about technology or firepower. This was about the strength of human spirit. And for the first time, Lyra was beginning to realize just how powerful that could be. "We're ready," John said, his voice calm but firm. He turned to face Lyra. "Are you?" Lyra nodded, though her mind was racing. The plan was simple. They would use a combination of human guerrilla tactics and the Xanthion technology to strike at the invaders' command center, the heart of their operation. It was a risky move, but it was their best chance to disable the invaders and force them to retreat. They couldn't afford to fail. As the group began to move out, John took the lead, leading the way through the darkened streets. His footsteps were steady, his focus sharp. He didn't waste time with unnecessary words or distractions. He had a job to do, and he was going to do it to the best of his ability. Lyra followed closely behind, her mind working in tandem with his. She had learned to trust him in ways she hadn't thought possible. The more they worked together, the more she realized how much she had underestimated him. The journey to the enemy's stronghold was dangerous. The streets were filled with rubble, the remnants of buildings that had once stood tall. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the city, a constant reminder of the battle that was still being fought. But John and his team didn't hesitate. They moved quickly, using the cover of night to avoid detection. As they neared the command center, they encountered their first wave of invader forces. Lyra's alien technology gave them an advantage, but it was John's quick thinking that kept them one step ahead. He directed the group with precision, guiding them to a series of hidden tunnels that led directly to the heart of the enemy's operations. They were almost there, but the tension was unbearable. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as they approached their final destination, inside the command center. The invaders were busy coordinating their attack, unaware that they were about to be ambushed. Lyra and John had prepared a plan to disable the center's main power supply. cutting off the invaders' ability to control their forces. But to get to the power core, they would have to navigate a maze of corridors, guarded by enemy soldiers. John led the way, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. He moved with the confidence of someone who had been through this before, despite the fact that this was the first time he had ever faced such danger. His training had prepared him for this, and now he was using everything he had learned to protect the people he cared about. As they approached the central chamber, they were spotted by one of the invaders' scouts. A loud alarm sounded, and within moments, they were surrounded. The enemy foe. RSEs poured into the corridors, weapons raised. For a moment, it seemed like all hope was lost, but John didn't hesitate. He grabbed a nearby weapon, an energy rifle from one of the fallen invaders, and fired it with deadly accuracy. His shots hit their targets with precision, and the invaders fell one by one. Lyra, standing beside him, used her advanced Xanthion tech to disable their shields, making it easier for John to take them down. Together, they fought with a fury that surprised even themselves. The invaders, caught off guard by the human resistance, struggled to regain control. After a tense battle, the last of the invaders fell. The room fell silent save for the sound of heavy breathing and the distant hum of the power core. They had done it. The invaders' command center was disabled, and the enemy's control over the battle was broken. Lyra turned to John, her heart racing. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with awe. "We actually did it." John looked back at her, his face grim but determined. "We're not done yet. We still need to get out of here." But for the first time since the invasion had started, Lyra felt a sense of hope. She realized that John was right. This wasn't the end, but it was a beginning. They had shown the invaders that humanity was not to be underestimated. They had fought back with everything they had, and they had won, as they made their way back to safety. Lyra couldn't help but feel a deep sense of respect for the human race. They were more than just survivors. They were fighters. And they had just proven it. The victory at the command center was a turning point, but it was only the beginning. The invaders were still on Earth, and their forces were scattered, but not defeated. Lyra and John knew that the battle wasn't over. They'd won one important fight, but the war was far from finished. The invaders had a large fleet, and their forces were still positioned across the planet. Earth's survival depended on the next steps they would take, and they had to act quickly. Lyra and John gathered their group of survivors in a makeshift command center, a building that had once been a school but now served as their headquarters. The survivors were weary, their faces marked by exhaustion and fear, but there was something else in their eyes, too. Hope. They had seen that the invaders could be stopped. They had seen that a small group of humans could make a difference. The enemy was not invincible. "We need to push forward," John said, his voice steady. He stood at the front of the room, addressing the group. "The invaders are weakened, but they're still here. We can't let up now." Lyra stood beside him, watching as the humans listened. She had never imagined that she would be working with people like this. Humans, in her eyes, had always been weak, too emotional, too unpredictable. But now, as she watched John speak to the survivors, she saw a strength in him, and in the others, that was hard to ignore. These weren't just ordinary people. These were fighters. We have to make them believe that Earth is worth fighting for, Lyra said, her voice low but filled with conviction. "We need to unite every human on this planet. We need to show them that they can stand up to the invaders." John nodded. "But it's not going to be easy. Invaders are already regrouping. We've only delayed their plans. We need to hit them where it hurts. Take out their remaining forces and their supply lines." Lyra's mind raced. She knew they were right. The invaders had suffered a major blow, but their forces were still large, and they were highly organized. It was going to take everything they had to push them back. But Lyra was no longer the outsider she had once been. She was part of this world now, and she was willing to fight for it as the group made its plans. Lyra couldn't help but think about how far they had come. Only a few days ago, she had seen humans as weak, unprepared for anything outside their own planet. She had thought that Earth would fall easily to the invaders, but now she saw something different. She saw a species that could fight back, that could survive, no matter the odds. And she saw that it wasn't just technology or weapons that made them strong, it was their determination, their willingness to sacrifice for each other. It was something Lyra had never experienced before. The survivors quickly formed a strategy. John would lead one group to the front lines, using guerrilla tactics to disrupt the invaders' operations. Meanwhile, Lyra would lead another team too, gather intelligence, and sabotage the remaining enemy supply lines. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. The invaders had to be pushed back before they could regroup. It wasn't easy. As they moved through the ruined cities, they faced constant danger. The invaders were always one step behind them, trying to regroup and strike back. But John's leadership and Lyra's knowledge of advanced technology gave them an edge. Humans, under John's guidance, worked quickly and efficiently. They knew what they had to do, and they did it without hesitation. Lyra couldn't help but admire them more with each passing day. During one of their missions, Lyra found herself in a tense situation. She had infiltrated an enemy stronghold, using her Xanthion technology to disable the security systems. Mission was to gather vital information, but she had underestimated the invaders' ability to adapt. As she moved through the building, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned just in time to see a group of invader soldiers approaching. Her heart raced, but she didn't panic. She knew she had to act quickly. She used her technology to create a shield of energy around her, deflecting the incoming fire. With quick thinking, she disabled the soldiers' weapons, leaving them defenseless. It wasn't a fight she wanted, but it was one she had to win. Once the soldiers were taken care of, she collected the information she needed and quickly left the building, rejoining John and the others. Later that evening, as the group huddled around a fire, John spoke again. "We've made progress, but we can't let our guard down. The invaders won't give up easily. We have to stay sharp." Lyra nodded, sitting beside him. "I've seen what humans are capable of now. I've never understood before, but now I do. You fight for each other, not because you have to, but because you want to. That's something even the most powerful empires can't take away." John looked at her, his expression serious but softening with understanding. "We may not have your technology, but we've got something just as powerful each other. That's what makes us strong." Lyra didn't respond right away. She sat quietly, thinking about what he had said. It was true. Humanity had a strength. That went beyond weapons or advanced tech. It was a strength that came from the heart, from the desire to protect and care for others. As the fire burned low, Lyra looked out into the distance, where the last of the invaders' ships still hovered. In the sky, she didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. Earth was far from the weak, helpless planet she had once thought it to be. The humans had proven that they could stand tall in the face of overwhelming odds. Lyra believed they could win this war. The war had gone on for weeks, but every day the humans seemed to grow stronger. They had taken back several towns, pushing the invaders back, step by step. John and Lyra, along with their group of survivors, had become leaders in a fight that had seemed impossible from the start. The invaders' forces were still strong, but their grip on Earth was loosening. With every battle they fought, they proved that the strength of humanity was far more powerful than anyone had imagined. Lyra had learned more about humans in the past weeks than she had in all her years as a princess. She had seen them face destruction, loss, and fear, and yet they never gave up. They fought for each other, not because they were forced to, but because they cared. It was something that Lyra had never fully understood until now. She had always thought that strength came from technology, from power, and from control. But now she saw that real strength came from the heart, from the courage to stand up in the face of danger, even when the odds seemed impossible. The final push against the invaders was near. Lyra and John stood together on a hill overlooking the last remaining enemy base. The sky was dark, and the sound of distant explosions filled the air. It was a feeling that had become all too familiar. The last battle would determine the fate of Earth. If they failed, everything they had fought for would be lost. "Are you ready for this?" John asked, his voice calm, but there was an edge to it. It led his people through so much, and now the end was in sight. But the pressure was heavy. Lyra turned to him, her face serious but determined. "We've come this far. We can't stop now. We fight, not just for survival, but for everything Earth stands for. For freedom, for hope." John nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. He had come to understand just how much Lyra had changed. At first, she had seen Earth as a weak and insignificant planet, but now she had become part of humanity's fight. She no longer looked down on the people of Earth. She had seen their courage, their resilience, and now she respected them. She had joined their cause fully, not just as an observer, but as an ally. As they prepared to launch their final assault, John called the survivors together. They had one goal: to destroy the invaders' command center and disable their remaining forces. It was their best chance at ending the war. The humans were ready, but there was still a fear that lingered in the air. This would be the hardest battle yet. But they had come this far, and they were willing to give everything to finish it. John turned to Lyra one last time before the battle began. "Whatever happens, we've already won," he said. "We've shown them that humanity is more than they ever gave us credit for." Lyra smiled, though her heart was heavy. "Yes, we've shown them. But we still have one last fight. To win, the final assault was a blur of action." The team moved quickly, using the cover of darkness to approach the enemy base. The invaders' forces were scattered, but still formidable. There were battles on every corner, the sounds of gunfire and explosions echoing in the night. Lyra and John led the way, working together in perfect sync. She used her alien technology to disable enemy shields, while John's quick thinking and experience guided the group through each obstacle. But the invaders weren't giving up without a fight. As they neared the command center, they were met with a heavy resistance. The invaders had fortified their last stronghold, and it was clear that they would do anything to keep control of Earth. The fighting was fierce, but the humans were determined. Every inch of ground they gained was hard fought, but they refused to turn back. At the heart of the battle, John and Lyra made their way into the command center. They had one mission: to destroy the invaders' central power core. Without it, the invaders would lose their control over their remaining forces. But as they approached the core, they were confronted by the enemy's leader, a towering figure, a being whose strength and power matched that of the most advanced species in the galaxy. "You're too late," the leader snarled, his voice cold and threatening. "Earth will fall, no matter what you do." Lyra stood her ground, her eyes burning with determination. "We'll see about that." Without warning, the leader lunged at them, but John was quicker. He grabbed a nearby weapon and fired, his shots hitting their target with precision. Invader staggered back, but he wasn't down yet. He was strong, but John and Lyra had something he didn't: the will to fight for a future. A future they had built together with the humans. The invader charged again, but this time, Lyra was ready. She used her technology to create a shield, blocking his attack long enough for John to strike the final blow. The invader fell, and the room was silent. They had done it. Lyra and John stood, together, breathing heavily, their hearts pounding in their chests. The battle was over. The invaders were defeated. Earth was free. As the team made their way back to safety, Lyra looked at John, a sense of pride and respect filling her heart. She had seen the true strength of humanity, and it had changed her forever. They had fought not just for survival, but for each other. And in doing so, they had shown the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. In the days that followed, Earth began to rebuild. The survivors mourned their losses, but celebrated their victory. Lyra stayed with them, helping to rebuild the planet and ensuring that the invaders would never return. She knew that she had found a new purpose on Earth, one that was far more meaningful than any mission she had ever been given. The days after the final battle felt like a slow, steady breath of relief. Earth had won. The invaders were gone, their forces scattered, their leaders defeated. People everywhere began to rebuild, to pick up the pieces of their shattered world. It wasn't going to be easy, and there was still much work to do, but For the first time in weeks, the weight of fear and uncertainty was gone. The humans had fought, and they had triumphed. Lyra, once an outsider looking in, now felt like she belonged. She had come to Earth with a mission to observe, but she had stayed to fight. She had seen humanity at its best and worst, and she had seen how powerful their spirit could be. They were not the weak, insignificant beings she had once believed them to be. They were resilient, brave, and capable of more than anyone could have imagined. As Lyra walked through the streets of the city, she noticed the changes in the people around her. There was a new sense of pride in the air, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Humans had faced the ultimate test and had come out stronger. They had shown that they could fight for what they loved, that they could protect their homes, and that they could stand up against the impossible. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about hope, about a future they could build together. John stood beside her, looking out over the city. His eyes were tired, but there was a sense of peace about him now. He had led his people through the darkest times, and now he was watching them rise again. The quiet, unremarkable man who had once thought his life would always be ordinary was now a hero. He had proven that even the most unlikely person could make a difference. "We did it," John said quietly, his voice soft but filled with pride. "We actually did it," Lyra nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Yes, we did." John turned to her, his expression serious. "I don't think I ever truly understood what it meant to fight for something bigger than yourself. Until now. But you showed me what real strength looks like. You've changed everything I thought I knew about humans." Lyra's heart swelled with emotion. She had never thought of herself as a teacher, but she had learned so much from these people. It was the humans who had shown her the true meaning of courage and sacrifice, not the other way around. "You've taught me just as much," she said. "I've learned that strength comes not from power, but from the will to protect those you care about, and from the ability to keep going, no matter the odds." They stood together in silence for a moment, the weight of everything they had been through hanging in the air. It had been a long, hard road, but they had made it to the other side. And now it was time to rebuild. In the days that followed, Lyra worked alongside the humans to help restore Earth. The damage had been extensive. There was still much to be done. Buildings needed to be rebuilt, communities needed to heal, and the world needed to come together again. But there was a new sense of unity now. The war had brought people together in ways nothing else had. Everyone, from the young to the old, worked together to restore their planet. They knew that the future they built would be one they could all be proud of. Lyra found herself becoming more and more involved in the efforts. She used her knowledge of advanced technology to help speed up the recovery process, but she also spent time with the people. She helped teach, shared stories, and learned about Earth's history and cultures. She had once believed that humans were primitive, but now she was beginning to understand just how rich their world truly was. As Lyra sat with John one evening, watching the sun set over a rebuilt city, she felt a deep sense of peace. The war was over, but their journey was just beginning. Together they would continue to build a future where both humans and aliens could coexist in harmony. It's a future where strength was not measured by technology, but by the willingness to stand together, no matter what. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad I stayed," Lyra said softly. "Earth is unlike anything I've ever known. It's not perfect, but it's beautiful in its own way. I'm proud to be here." John smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Glad you stayed too. You've helped us see just how strong we really are. You've made us better." Lyra's heart fluttered at his words. She had never imagined that she would find a place where she truly belonged. But now, she knew that Earth was that place. She had come to this planet to observe, to learn, but she had ended up finding something much more. She had found a family, a purpose, and a future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the city, Lyra and John sat together in the quiet peace that followed the storm. The battle for Earth was over, but the real work was just beginning. And for the first time in a long time, Lyra felt that anything was possible. She had seen the strength of humanity. She had seen their courage, their resilience, and their unwavering belief in a better tomorrow.